Hi and welcome. Thank you all for today's interview with special guest Casey Ruff. Casey, welcome.
Thank you so much. Special guest. I feel honored.
That's right. I reserved this for you today. Casey, you interviewed me a few days ago, and I realized by talking to you how many similar things we have, especially regarding nutrition. So I am very interested in your background. So if you can share that with me and our audience, and also how you eventually came to change your mindset regarding diet, and how did you come to an animal-based approach?
Yeah, of course. So I became kind of interested in health and fitness as I guess like a preteen. I was a little bit chubby growing up, although I loved to play sports. I kind of learned that, through lifting weights, I could gain muscle, and that made me feel better in middle school and high school. I was always attracted to playing ice hockey and cycling and those kinds of things. But I went to school to study architecture. I thought I wanted to be an architect. So I was doing that in school. But at the time, I also joined a big box gym, basically to train for the off season of cycling. And as I was in that big box gym, I started watching some of the personal trainers and thought, like, wow, this is really fun. These guys look like they're having a really good time. They're working with people one-on-one. They're showing them the right exercises. They were also using heart rate monitors at the time, which was something that I had been using for several years. And I saw that that was a tool that they were using. So I decided, this looks great. Let me see what I need to do to be a personal trainer. So I walked into the manager's office. He showed me what certification to get online. And so I did that. And a few months later, I got hired on as a personal trainer with zero experience. And that was the end of architecture. I never went back to school for any of that. And I got to kind of train my people. So that was really fun. And that was back in 2007 when I first started. So back then, we didn't really have a huge focus on nutrition. Everybody knew how to kind of eat well, which was you eat lots of vegetables, you have lots of whole grains, keep your proteins lean. So a lot of the trainers were eating every 2 to 3 hours, lots of salads and chicken. And that was all just fine back then. A lot of the nutrition I had been exposed to is more from like the bodybuilding world. And so lots of brown rice, lots of broccoli, again, chicken breasts and things like that.
Right.
And when classic stuff that we've all eaten way too much of. And anyway, through my career, I eventually got trained to work on metabolic carts. And so these are the machines and equipment that basically we can hook up to people. Basically, we attach a mask that's collecting their respirations. And the respirations can tell us all kinds of different information about the calories they were burning. It could tell us about where the calories were coming from, whether they're burning more fat or carbohydrates. Most people would recognize like a VO2 max test where they know how much they can breathe at their maximum, where their heart rate zones are. We can also use resting metabolic tests. So how many calories do you burn just to be yourself and sit in a chair? And so we were using that information to help give people training programs and heart rate zones. And, back then we would look at metabolism exactly the way that most people see metabolism: calories in, calories out. So you come in, you do a test with me, we measure, and we find out that you burn 1,500 calories a day just being you, not doing anything other than sitting in a chair. And you have your job, and that's going to burn another 400 calories. And then if you work out on top of that, that's going to burn another few hundred calories. And so most people, obviously coming to us for weight loss, we would use those numbers and say, okay, you burn a total of 2,300 calories a day. So let's have you eat 500 calories less every single day. So let's have you eat 1,800 calories. And by the math, 500 calories multiplied by 7 days is 3,500, which is 1 pound of fat. And so we would say, okay, by the end of this week 1, you should lose 1 pound. And by week 2, you should lose 2 pounds. And by week 3, it's your total of 3 pounds, and so on and so forth. But it never worked that way. Like everybody we ever put through that, they would lose a lot of weight in the beginning, but then the weight loss would slow down. We would notice that our people would become a little bit more tired, a little cranky. They would have less and less willpower. They'd be super motivated in January, but as the weeks wore on and the weight loss is stalling, and now they're feeling terrible, have, cravings for things, their energy's in the toilet. It's way more tempting to binge on, 10 donuts in the break room or whatever. And so as many people as we put through those protocols, we just noticed that things were not really working very well in the way that we, were telling people they should work. And then as trainers, we would just turn around and, do the Jason Fung thing, blame the victim. We're going to blame you for not following our advice. I told you to do that 500 calorie run on the treadmill and eat 500 calories less, and you can't do it. Well, you suck. Like, you need better willpower. You need to stick with it. This is why you've gained so much weight.
Did you say the Jason Fung thing?
Yeah, so Dr. Jason Fung talks about this all the time in the obesity code, and he calls it blaming the victim. And it's
Oh,
like,
okay. Yeah, because
we
I
don't
know
ever.
that he's not blaming the victim. So you just want to let everybody know that Dr. Jason Fung is a good resource.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
good clarification.
Yeah, got it. Okay.
Yeah, so anyway, it was several years of doing that, and not having our clients get very good results was just kind of frustrating, but it was what it was. We didn't know any other way. And it was in 2012, our company did a call with a contractor who's doing the same kind of testing that we were doing. And he was working with endurance athletes, which I was a cyclist. So I was interested in endurance. But in this call, he was describing how he could change people's metabolism, especially while they exercise, by changing the diet. And this is mind-blowing to me at the time. I had no idea you could do that, and you could improve somebody's fat burning, for example, which would then make an endurance athlete be able to last much longer. You have a very limited storage of sugar in the body, and that runs out, and most endurance athletes know that you bonk, you run out of energy all of a sudden. And so this guy was saying that he was feeding his athletes high fat things that I thought were, completely off the table for what you should be eating. So heavy cream and butter and bacon. And he's describing these top level, like professional triathletes competing at the highest levels, only taking in, less than 60 or 70 calories on the bike every single hour, which was complete opposite of everything that we'd been told at the time. You had to eat lots of sugar while you were biking, or again, you'd run out of energy. So that was the first time that it was ever introduced to me that nutrition could make a difference in metabolism and metabolic rate. The next stage, I remember we acquired 2 new trainers who started saying that eat fat to get fit. It was like, what are you talking about? Eat fat to get fit? That's not a thing. They talked about healthy fat. Like, what the hell is health? There's no healthy fat. Like, all fat is bad, of course. Right. And so, we started putting olive oil on things and had avocados every now and again, and energy was better. And so that started to kind of open up different possibilities of how nutrition really could affect people. I came across Nina Teichel's book, The Big Fat Surprise, and how influential that was in my career. And really all of this to say, like, what we were doing, what we were told to do was not working. Just flat wasn't working. People couldn't do it. And if they did, it didn't produce the result that we wanted it to. So everybody quit. And so we started to find this other thing that nobody was talking about, and it started to work for people. And that's kind of how I got introduced into, okay, maybe fat is okay in the diet and can actually help people.
Wonderful. And it's so great to hear that. And I think also you didn't go through like the whole nutrition brainwashing thing, like, because I feel for me, hey, it took me like way too long to come around, and I kept just applying it to myself, and it just would not work. And it was like I mentioned on the podcast where you had me on, I was talking about just how difficult it was for me to finally understand that everything that I was taught was wrong. So I'm so glad. I know it still was a process for you because you still were taught the opposite things, but at least, you were applying it at maybe a faster rate with a lot more clients as opposed to like just on you. And you could see that simply wasn't working for pretty much most people. So yeah, I'm so glad to hear that more and more people in this field are realizing and seeing through all the BS and all of the misinformation that we've been given. We can dive into why all of this is happening, and I have my thoughts on it, but I want to continue on with your background and try to see, did you apply this to yourself? Like, what was your personal experience with that?
Yeah, definitely. And you bring up such a good point when you're talking about like learning this one way. And I was fortunate enough not to have to go through the medical system in that way, because you have to undo, but you're sitting there thinking like, how I must be wrong. There's no way that all of the nutrition guidelines, the American Heart Association, the American Diabetes Association, every nutrition book I've ever read, there's no way that all of them could be wrong about this. It blows your mind. It's so crazy. So part of what we had to do with the company that we were with was we would have to do weight loss challenges. So the company started offering 2 times a year. They would do, it was called the 90-day challenge. It was a 3-month weight loss contest. And as personal trainers, you know, you've worked as a trainer before. You know, it's you're on the grind. It's 100% commission. It's a lot of work, a lot of sales. And as trainers, we were, you know, we had numbers we were expected to hit, and we had to fill people up to do these contests with us and buy our services. And the company figured out really quickly that if people signed up for these programs, they would make a lot of money. So it wasn't very long before they said, well, we're doing 90-day contests twice a year. Why don't we do 60-day contests and do them 4 times a year? And sure enough, they made a lot of money doing that. And so as trainers, we'd be responsible to sign people up, do a consultation with them, weigh them in the first time. We would give them, you know, the company's packet of, you know, 100 different recipes and exotic shopping lists with ingredients you've never heard of before, and all the meal plans and preps, and here's your instructions, and here's all these events that you're going to do. And it just, again, the compliance on a program like that was so low. Like we would calculate it, and it would be like in the teens. Like 15% of the people who started the contest would actually show up at the very end of the contest to weigh out. And all the while, it was very low. It was somewhere in the teens. 15 is an estimate, but yeah, it was literally not
very low. Yeah.
Very low, not more than 20%. And I'm talking successfully or unsuccessfully, just looking at, if I weighed you in at the start, did you even show up to weigh out at the very end, whether you lost or gained or whatever. So again, as a trainer, you're frustrated because you know, these people aren't getting good results. They're dropping off pretty early. But the other frustrating thing, just from a numbers standpoint and a business standpoint, is, you know, a month later, a new contest is starting. We have to find a whole new cohort of people to do them. And if all these people weren't successful the first time, they're not going to sign up again and again and again. So it's just hard. It was hard to pitch these programs to people. And, you know, you always had another one coming, and it was always going to fail. And I remember very specifically, I sat down with a guy. He was, you know, an employee. He was kind of forced to do the program anyway. And I'm listening to the things that he's eating, and he's, you know, waking up in the middle of the night eating cereal, and he's on a lot of the carbohydrates and whole grains and whatever. And I'm just listening to him, and I'm thinking like, okay, wow, you have mentioned no fat. You're trying to lose like 25 pounds. So I just said, like, look, let's see if we can get a little bit more fat in your diet, and you know, see how this goes. And I'll never forget. It came back to me a day and a half later. He says, dude, I've already lost 2 pounds. What the hell is this keto thing? And I'm like, that's great. First of all. Second of all, I've heard of it, but I really don't know enough about this. So let me find out and I'll tell you. And sure enough, that's where we really deep dove into the low carbohydrate space. That was 2018. I want to say that we really got into that and started realizing like carbohydrates were not essential in the diet. This guy won the contest, and so we got recognized for that. He got recognized for that. He ended up getting really close to his goal weight. So in 60 days, he lost like 25 pounds. Wow. We were using body fat scales. And so that was the other surprising thing, is like we were validating that people were losing fat. They weren't just losing weight, they were losing fat.
Like on a BIA machine, like an InBody. Okay.
Exactly. It was the InBody 570. Yeah, bioelectrical impedance. And so it can measure, you know, skeletal muscle mass or fat mass. And people weren't losing, you know, lean mass. They weren't losing water weight. They were losing a lot of fat. And so we finished that contest and like really stoked. This guy got really good results. And my wife and I were sitting around and, you know, preparing for the next one and just kind of talking like, this sucks. Like we have to go find new people. Like, what are we going to do? We have to run this stupid program. And we kind of had this idea, like, what if we do our own thing? What if we sign people up for this? But rather than mess with all the other things that the company was doing, why don't we find other meal plans and give them to them? And why don't we do some seminars, and we can bring people in and talk to them about this in the very beginning, and then maybe have other seminars where we talk about, you know, if you're stalling, these are some things you could do, and maybe some things that you can do on your way out. And so we just started running our own program, and everybody who signed up with us knew that they were doing this rogue thing that nobody was talking about. We could fly under the radar. The company didn't know. And we got people really great results. We had the advantage of using that scale to measure weight and body fat percentage. And, this isn't a random controlled trial, but we have data from all those people who did the contest. And it was like more than 60% of the people who started actually finished. So the compliance was way better. We tracked over, I want to say it was over like 160 or 180 people. And we found that of those people, the 68% or whatever it was that finished, it was like 121 people. They lost a combined 98% of all their weight came from fat.
Wow.
It's mind blowing. I never thought you could do that. In any textbook that I have for nutrition or personal training, there's nothing that says that you can do that. And again, this isn't a randomized controlled trial, but this is a pretty large sample of people, men and women, young and old. Some people wanted to lose 200 pounds. Other people wanted to gain 10 pounds of muscle. Like, it was all across the board. And we had, very simple meal plans that we gave to people, and really, pretty low level of educational resources besides, just the low carbohydrate space, and people got tremendous results. And so for me, that was it. That was what I was going to do. And that was my entire career at that point.
And that flipped the switch for you, because you saw real results, and you saw like it was the exact same kind of challenge. And the only thing that differed was the type of food that you were recommending to your clients. Amazing.
Yeah, it was really amazing.
And how do you feel about the carnivore diet right now? Because I know we were talking the other day, and we were talking about the animal-based diet. What has been your experience with that?
Yeah. So we've hosted Sean Baker on our show, Dr. Sean Baker, who is amazing, obviously. And I repeat this story a lot, but I had to tell him in the interview that to this day, I still have not gone back to listen to the second half of the interview he did on Rogan when I turned it off.
Really?
Here's this doctor. He's in his, mid 50s. He's crushing deadlifts and only eating ribeye. I was like, okay, like, I'm bought into the low carbohydrate thing, but this is insane. This is absurd. And I turned the episode off. Now, I'm a coach for his website, and I posted him on the show, and super cool dude. But that was my first exposure, was hearing him on Joe Rogan. I really kind of planted the seed. I wasn't ready for the full carnivore diet then, but over time you start learning about it a little bit more, and learning that people are actually like feeling better. They didn't need the carbohydrates to start to feel even more satiated than before. And so it was April of 2019 where I did a 30-day carnivore experiment, and I decided to go really strict. I was still working at the gym at the time.
You mean on yourself?
Oh, on myself. Yes.
Oh, okay. I would love to hear more about that.
Yeah. I decided, again, I'd been low carb for a while and saw those benefits. My energy was way better than when I was eating a lot of carbohydrates. I was less hungry. But, again, the notion of carnivore really intrigued me. And before I recommended it to other people, I wanted to try it myself. And so, again, that was April of 2019 was my 30-day carnivore experiment. And I felt way better. It was like almost instantly, I just had way more energy. I didn't feel like I was lacking energy before, but there was more now, and there was less hunger, and I could eat once or twice a day and get stuffed on food that I absolutely love. Like, I don't know, 10 eggs or, a pound and a half of ribeye or ground beef. The foods that you really, I don't know many people that can get really sick of these foods. They always are very tasty, are really fulfilling, really satiating, which is very different than being filling. Like, when I was eating like chicken salads, I'd get full in my stomach, but 2 hours later, you're starving. But satiation is like this magic thing where food's off your mind. You're not thinking about food because you're not hungry. Now you're going out and enjoying life a lot more. And it was great. And so day 31 of my carnivore experiment, I didn't stop doing anything, and I just continued going down the carnivore path, and that's been my life ever since. I varied up, the level of strictness for me personally. Sometimes I've been very, very strict, other times less strict, and I notice that I don't feel as good when I do that. And so it's been a wonderful journey, not only to do it for myself, but also coach people through it over time. And I will say, like, the most surprising thing to me that happened, besides the energy, was my mentality, the mental clarity. I remember a really stressful event happening at work that cost me a few $100s of pay. And in the past, it would have probably ruined my day. I would have been really upset. But I just remember handling things in such a calmer way. But my head was literally different. It wasn't metaphysical or anything. Like, I could think more clearly and be less stressed and more grateful. And my spirituality improved, my mindfulness improved, like in a way that I can't really describe any other way. That was the thing that really surprised me the most.
Interesting. Yeah, its effects on mood and mental health is huge. I feel that the exact same thing. I feel like if I have a salad, oftentimes like the next day, my mood is almost depressed. Not almost, it is depressed, but I mean, not like severe, but definitely a huge stark difference from where I am normally. And there is absolutely no reason for me to feel that way. And now, recently, obviously I started realizing that it could have been the foods that I eaten. And now if I do ever have veggies, I know that that might be the risk that I'm taking. And so that's why I don't do it. And then the aches and pains, I feel like I don't need as much recovery, even though I'm training very hard. When I do eat something that is not only animal based, anything other than animal based food, I just feel very achy, very sore, as if I need a full day or 2 days of recovery, So, and I've noticed that with a lot of people, sleep improves. I mean, just so many things that we never really were taught were ever related to diet, and now we're realizing how many things are very closely related to diet. Skin conditions, I keep mentioning this just because it just happened last semester. A student of mine reversed her psoriasis. I mean, how many doctors have ever contemplated a link between diet and a skin condition like psoriasis? Almost nobody, right? It's like
Totally.
there's no cure for it. We're just gonna give you drugs to suppress your immune system because this isn't that great. This is exactly what we need right now, right?
Yeah.
And that's the end of that,
Totally. No, that's a great point. I noticed, with every diet, when you change a diet from one to another, you notice certain benefits. And I really noticed when people were switching mostly from like a keto low carb to carnivore, that's when all the weird things would happen. Like you probably already have lost a bit of weight, your mentality is probably a little bit better, but when you make that switch, that's when we were hearing stories of psoriasis and eczema is gone. I don't know why. My elbow was always itchy and now it's not, or my knees always ached, or one of the first times I made the connection between the foods we eat and sunlight exposure. One of my clients told me like my legs and feet never could get tan. Now they get perfectly tan in the sun. I never use sunscreen. I can be out all day. I could never do that before. And you're like, wow, I had no idea that, yeah, if you're eating a bunch of crap and a bunch of seed oils and plant foods, those don't necessarily interact in your skin with the sun the way you want it to. And so it is amazing to hear all the stories of people out there and anxiety, depression, all these myriad of different things being improved with diet. It's crazy. You're right.
It's insane. Who would have thought that things like celery or limes can have photosensitizers in them that are going to make you far more likely to burn when you get exposed to sunlight, instead of getting a tan, you actually get burnt. And it's so funny because people can go and check out like the news articles where people literally have really bad burns because they've handled lime outside for a full day, and they can see the impact on skin, but then they don't think twice about putting that inside their body.
Totally.
It's mind blowing.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It is. And again, for most people, it's just that uphill battle of you've only been taught this one way that plants are the best things for you, that meat is to be feared. We only see the headlines that say red meat causes cancer without, looking at the data and seeing that the data is incredibly weak, and the headlines don't capture what the study is even saying at all. It's really hard for people to understand that.
It's hard, and I get it. It's hard to conduct nutrition research. I understand how difficult that is, but because it's difficult, we need to all be super aware just how flimsy the evidence in nutrition is, and we should not be making laws and policies relying on the lowest quality data available.
That's right. Yeah,
We
that's
just
right.
we just don't have a good rigorous scientific process in nutrition, and the food frequency questionnaire is a nightmare. I mean, and then the biases, like we mentioned last time, right? The researchers' biases. Everybody is already pretty much convinced that plants are great, veggies are wonderful for us. It's so mind-blowing. Like, if you just stop for a second and think, like, why would something so great for us like veggies be so off-putting for a little baby? Shouldn't that come, like, shouldn't we be born with an instinct to love something that is so great for us, that is going to make us survive at a much higher rate? Like, just thinking about that for a second should give us pause, everybody, and realize that that is not food. That is not human food. None of our ancestors went for that first. That was a fallback food if they ever couldn't get a good kill, if they couldn't hunt and they didn't have large fatty mammals that they could get their hands on. Then yeah, they would have the veggies, they would have the tubers, whatever they could find. And that's only by trial and error. They figured out which ones were the poisonous ones, because as it stands, 80% of plant foods are poisonous. So we only have access to like 20% of plant foods that were not going to kill us.
Yeah.
So, you know.
Yeah, that's a really good point that you make there. And I think, yeah, once you step out of the paradigm, you start asking some of those questions that are just common sense. Like, what foods could we have eaten 365 days out of the year? You know, like, were vegetables and fruits just growing 365 days out of the year in every place on the planet?
Ice age. In an ice
right.
age.
That's right. We had an ice age. Yeah, it takes that common sense. You mentioned the baby. Like, I love the page from the smoker that I have, which is Traeger, and they show babies like grabbing a rib for the first time and trying a rib, and it lights them up. You can tell, like, that's the right food. That's human food that we should have. And it is really amazing to contemplate that us as humans, we are omnivores. We can have plant foods and we can have animal foods, which is really cool. You don't see a lot of other animals that can eat such a vastly different diet. But we have learned over, many thousands of years, exactly what you said, like which plants are too toxic for us to even use, or how do we prepare our foods outside of the body to be safer for us inside the body. I mean, most potatoes in South America, if you eat them naturally, they will kill you. They're highly toxic. And the native peoples learned to eat those potatoes with mud or a certain clay or whatever. And, through fermentation and through, drying and all these different things, we're able to detoxify. Cooking can certainly help. But there is toxins in plants. And to think that plants are just here for our amazement and satisfaction, and they're just going to give up all of their food and energy to us all the time without repercussions, is absolutely not the case. Yeah. Those plants are smart as hell. They are here on this planet for exactly the same reason that we are. They want to take over the world. And sometimes it might be beneficial to the plant to give you a small fruit that maybe has a bunch of seeds, so that you will take the fruit and say, wow, this is kind of tasty. And then you're going to poop out, what you ate plus the seeds, and now a new tree is going to grow that benefits the tree. But when you start talking about like the leaves and the stalks and the roots and the reproductive areas of the plants, those are highly fortified by the plant so that you don't eat them.
Love it. Highly defended parts of the plant. Exactly.
Absolutely.
Exactly. I had a student once, a couple of semesters ago, he told me a story about his grandmother in Cuba. She boiled cassavas, and then the water that she used to boil the cassavas, she gave it to her pig, and her pig drank that water and died.
Wow.
The toxins that leached out. Just to show you like how toxic plants can be. And that makes sense. They were here first, and the ones that are still alive and they have not gone extinct have been able to do so because of their self-defense mechanisms, because they were able to defend themselves against insects, animals. Yeah. And the largest animal, or like maybe the smartest animal, the human beings. So yeah.
Yeah, that's such a great point. And there's so many of those like common sense things that we could be thinking about, like how we moved around the planet, we've taken over most of the continents, but we overhunt, we kill the biggest animals, and we always have. And they had the more fat and the more muscle, and once those were gone, we had to hunt smaller and smaller animals. And and that's why our digestive system is set up the way that it is. That's why we have a super acidic stomach. It's not even purely carnivore. It's more like scavenger type acidity, so that we can eat even like rancid meat if we find it. Yeah. And the way our intestines are, and all these things, it should be a common sense thing to say that, yeah, we thrived on meat and animal foods for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. Yeah. And to say now that a plant-based diet is going to be the best thing for you, like, absolutely not.
What are your thoughts regarding this whole, how everything is set up right now because every time I teach a new semester, every time somebody brand new comes across my message, it's like a certain shock at first. It's like, what do you mean? Like, so the American Heart Association, the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, like all these large organizations that we give so much authority to, they're all wrong. You know, like what did you say when you were put in that position? Like how can we spread this message? And I don't know. It's a pretty uphill battle, really, the
Yeah.
way I see it. It's a long road.
It's a long road. That is such a good point, and it's a really great question. I will say pessimistically, I don't think that change is ever going to come from the top down. So I don't expect the American Heart Association to say like, "Oh, sorry guys, really screwed that up for the last 60 years. Our bad. We're going to change our recommendations, and now you can believe us here." Like that's not going to happen. The government, recommendations for dietary intake, that's never going to change, and that's unfortunate. And I think that we're going to go down a path that's going to lead to a lot more unhealth before we start to fix it. But the cool thing is we do have an impact with platforms like this.
Yeah.
You specifically chose not only to teach people, but also have a great YouTube channel, build a following so that people can get this message out there for free. It's the same reason why we do our podcast. We want to get the message out there. So I think the education and making it available for people can be really, really helpful. I would say in my career, the best thing I could do to help somebody understand what's really going on is to show them the example of what they've tried in the past. Okay, so you're sitting in front of me now. You've tried to lose weight 6 times, 10 times. Well, what did you do? Okay, well, I joined the gym in January. I started running on the treadmill and I started eating kale salads. Great. How did that go? Oh, it went awesome. I lost a bunch of weight. Great. What was it like at the end of the week? Well, at the end of the week, I was a little bit more tired. Okay, what happened as the weeks would go on? Well, I would get more and more tired and more hungry, and I couldn't stick with the diet because I didn't have enough willpower, and so I'm going to start this again. And it's like, okay, if you've done that before, probably multiple times, then what you're doing is creating weight gain. Like you are setting yourself up for the perfect program to make yourself be 15 or 20 pounds higher after this experiment fails. And I can predict it. And if you do the same thing that you've done, you're going to get the same results, and it's going to get worse and worse and worse. And so I think that's the best thing that we could do is really like point out how this has gone in the past for other people and show them like, okay, if that worked, it would have worked. And I'm telling you, like of the last 100 people that I've sat in front of, it didn't work for all 100 of them either. Right. You're not alone. You're just getting really bad information. So let's show you a different way to do this. And I think once people understand and appreciate that, they're a little bit more willing to consider, something that's a little bit more unconventional, because the conventional advice has failed them.
Yeah. Doing the same thing over and over again is the definition of insanity. Isn't that what Einstein said? Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
What's the point of doing something you've already done and failed at unless you've learned a lesson there? You have to learn a lesson there. And if you don't, and you're just repeating it just for the sake of repeating it, then you're probably going to get the same result that you got last time around.
Yeah, that's right. And with what we were doing back at the gym when we were working there, when we had those metabolic carts, this was another way that we could validate that. Like if you come up to do a test with me and it's July and you're wearing a jacket and you're a female and you're 35 and I can tell you're cold, you probably already have Hashimoto's or some other autoimmune disease, and I can tell you right now, you're probably carrying a little bit too much weight in the midsection, might be lean in the arms and legs, but the body is holding on to visceral fat to protect the organs and keep them warm, because I'm going to put you on this machine and I guarantee your metabolic rate is going to be far lower than what it is supposed to be. And we saw it over and over and over. If you do a diet, if you calorie restrict and you burn a bunch of calories, you're going to crash your metabolic rate. And it was confirmed with that study that they did. I want to say it was released in 2016 with all the Biggest Loser contestants, where they really did measure their metabolic rates. They followed them for 6 years. Most people had gained a very high percentage of their weight back, but their metabolic rates was still suppressed by like 600 calories on average. Like that's what you're doing when you're following that advice. When you're calorie counting and trying to burn a bunch of calories, you're telling your body that it is famine time. It is not a time to burn off energy. It's a time to hoard energy and hold on to any energy you can, you're literally going to slow down. Your energy is going to suck. Your cravings are going to go through the roof as a reward system to find those calorie bombs when you get them. And you're going to want to hold on to all of them. It sucks.
Yeah.
It's a totally the perfect way to gain weight.
Yeah. Yeah. Anytime you feel drained on a certain dietary lifestyle that's supposed to make you healthier, that's not the right approach. You're
That's
supposed
right.
to get healthier. As you drop body fat, you're supposed to have more energy, not less.
That's right.
Right? You have to have more strength, more vitality, better mood, better skin. So if those things aren't improving, then whatever you're doing is simply not working.
Yeah, totally agree. And all of that to say is like, it's not that it you know, the calorie balancing doesn't matter. It does matter. It's just we're looking at it the wrong way. Why don't we teach people what it takes to make their metabolic rate go up? Access the energy you have, burn off the extra energy, send signals to your body that says we have so many nutrients, we have all the protein and fat that we need, we're getting all the minerals that we need, we now have all this excess fat that we stored for just this reason. Like, let's use it, let's burn this off. That's why it's there. And people can get rid of it and have tremendous results without ever really feeling hungry or drained. Like you said, it now you're just burning more calories. You couldn't eat that many calories if you tried, because the body is now adapted to that and it's burning off the fat that you have already stored by following the wrong advice to begin with. So different.
Exactly. When you eat carbohydrates, your body forgets how to access fat as its main energy source, which is our natural state of being. I mean, babies are born on a fat-based metabolism. We, throughout evolution, spent most of our time in that fat-based metabolism, or ketosis, right? The moment you start introducing carbohydrates, and it really doesn't take a lot, the moment you start introducing that, your body over time forgets how to access your fat stores. And so now it is completely dependent and reliant on a sugar and carbohydrate hit every 3 hours, 2 to 3 hours. And so every time you eat carbs, you feel like, okay, you're getting some energy, but then that spikes your insulin, and then you have a drop afterwards. And that is a strong, that drop in the blood sugar level that happens 2 to 3 hours after a carbohydrate containing meal is a very strong stimulus for cravings and hunger. And so now 3 hours later, you're like, you can't think about anything else, you can't focus. And that's how I used to be, because I grew up eating a very high carbohydrate diet food that was prescribed by my dietitian at 14 years old, when I was 14. So I could not, like, the moment it hits me, I needed to eat like right then and there. I couldn't do anything else. You know, it was like this strong, almost a hypoglycemic attack, and hypotension at the same time. Like it just felt like super like down, you know? And the only thing I could think of is a quick source of energy, and that meant carbohydrates, more carbs, and the cycle continues and continues all day long. So the problem is that the reason you're so dependent on carbs is because your body can only store around 2,000 calories worth of carbohydrates in the form of glycogen in your liver and in your muscles at any point in time. You could manipulate that a little bit with carbohydrate loading, which is what a lot of endurance athletes would do, right? To kind of like eat tons and tons of carbs before a long-term event, and they can bump that up a little bit, but not recommended. Check out what happens to Timothy Noakes. He was a professor who did all the right things, followed all the guidelines, and then was an endurance athlete, triathlon, I think even. And he ended up with type 2 diabetes. So, you know, we do not want to end up with type 2 diabetes just to be able to win a race. So what you can do instead of relying on those 2,000 calories of stored glycogen is you want to take away the carbohydrates and let the body access your fat stores. Why? Because even if you are lean, even if you don't have any excess body fat, a lean individual has around anywhere, depending on the estimates, anywhere between 40,000 to 70,000 calories stored in your body, and you're just lean. Imagine if you're overweight or you're obese, how many more thousands of calories you have. And this is why when you become fat adapted and you remove the carbs and your body learns that it has all the stored energy it can access, you don't feel those drops in energy. You can go on and on and on. You can do full day fasts. Some people do multiple day fasts, you know, but that is easy and doable only after you take away the carbs and you allow the body to adapt, at least a few weeks to adapt to that fat-based metabolism.
100 100%. So when we were doing these metabolic tests for people, we were showing them, okay, if you're between this heart rate and this heart rate, you're burning, say, 12 calories a minute, and 8 of these calories are coming from fat. And if you go heart rate higher, now you're burning more calories, but you're actually burning less fat as fuel. And that was nice for people to see, like, okay, I can work out easier and actually burn more fat, literally. And on the next page, there was another graph, and it had exactly what you were describing. So it showed a person, showed the energy available to them, carbohydrates, 2,000. If it were a female, it would say 1,500, but somewhere in that ballpark, okay? You can store a little bit of carbohydrate, but that's limited and finite. And yes, you can carbo load, but frankly, like most of the carbo loading you do is gonna overshoot that number anyway. You're just gonna store all those calories as fat,
Right.
And then that same chart would have exactly what you were describing, which is how many calories of fat do you store? And this is now based on the input that we created, that's your weight and your body fat percentage. The number of jaws dropping when people realized they had 200,000, 300,000, 400,000 calories of fat stored on their body. And it's like, I would kind of equate it to, like, imagine you see a tanker full of gas. It's got unleaded gas that's driving down the street, but the tanker itself, the diesel engine, ran out of gas, and so the tanker can't go anywhere anymore. And it's like, that's kind of what we do. We're full of energy. We're getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger with that, and nobody likes it. You want it gone. You want to be lean, and you don't like it, and it jiggles. It's just like the tanker running out of gas. If that engine could burn both fuels, you'd have so much fuel. It would be really easy, and you'd be fine. But that's exactly what you were describing is the problem. And unfortunately, it wasn't just your life, and it wasn't just my life. You just described that up and down roller coaster is everybody's life out there.
Yeah.
That is a normal Tuesday. And for 40 years. And walk around, go look around and see how we're doing as a culture. We're not doing that great. Like, you see those pictures of the beach in the 70s, and nobody is fat. Nobody is overweight. And now it's harder. Like you mentioned, walking around Disneyland. I'm willing to bet you saw probably, you could count on one hand the number of people who were like reasonably fit.
Yeah, and it's painful to go to Orlando and go through the parks, and everybody's obese. It's like the morbid obesity, not just like the regular obesity. And then so we moved from Miami to Ocala a year ago, and so Miami's obesity rates are still a little bit less than the overall. But when you move up, upstate in Florida, you start to see more of like what the United States obesity epidemic really looks like. So here, it's just mind blowing. You go to the grocery store, there's not a day that you leave the house that you don't see just the sheer amount of severe obesity everywhere. And like young people or middle-aged people who should be at the prime of their lives, they can't go to a grocery store without having to sit in the disabled chair. And then you look in their cart and they're just buying more junk. And I'm like,
it's terrible.
But the link, don't you make that link?
The cereal box said it was heart healthy.
Huh?
The cereal box said heart healthy. I chose that food because it told me it was the healthiest. I've got my skim milk and my vegetables wrapped in plastic, placed in more plastic bags. And like, I'm my juice, here's my lovely juice. It's got vitamin C. Vitamin C is so good for me.
The colors, right? We love the colors, yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Like I hardly ever walked in those places in the grocery store, but even just last week, like going to the meat section, you walk by all these things, and it's not only the smell, you can smell all these foods, but it's a little overwhelming. This like rainbow of colors screaming at you, telling you how good they are for you. And I would argue that these are even the foods that, like, if you took any of these home and made yourself, that would at least be a step up from like eating out all your meals, which I see so much now anyway. Like, people are door dashing all their food, and it is absolutely tragic to see all these people in such poor health, and knowing that none of that has to be the case. Or the really good news that you can change. It doesn't matter where you are in the spectrum. You may have caused some damage that you're going to live with for the rest of your life, but you can still change. It's all about changing the paradigm and changing the conversation, and realizing that you have been bamboozled. You have been told an awful lie that makes a lot of people a lot of money. If I'm in the pharmaceutical industry, I want you to be using my product at 20, and then I want to keep you alive until you're 90. And that's what we're good at. We can do that now. And so I now have somebody who's using my product for 70 years, getting fat and sick, and we can keep them alive. They don't die. It's crazy. It's really, really tragic.
And then they get another side effect from that pill. And so now you have additional pills, and then you end up with a whole pharmacy. It's heartbreaking.
It is.
And I know it's hard. I know it's very hard to take that first step, because I know firsthand how addictive foods can be and how much of an effect it can have. It literally hijacks your brain. That's why I created a YouTube video. It's a very short one. I'll make sure to link it actually. And it's called How to Pull Yourself Out of Sugar and Food Addiction. And I give them a plan of how to do a dirty keto first, because the problem is that when you're eating all the crap and the junk, not only do you have the addictive problem, which is all the dopamine destruction, because it destroys the dopamine receptors in your brain, but you also have that carbohydrate addiction. So now when we want to remove those, we have two things we're working with that are a little bit difficult to detox from the body. It is the carbohydrate withdrawal, and then it is the dopamine withdrawal. So what I do is that, okay, let's tackle one thing first. Let's just tackle the carbohydrates first. Let's do keto, but let's do the fun keto. You can have the keto pizza, keto ice cream. I mean, all the junk keto foods you can have. And it works like a charm every time, because it almost requires no discipline or willpower. You know, it just requires a teeny tiny little bit of an initiative. The moment you do that, you feel so great about the fact that you are now not relying on carbohydrates for a few days. And so now you are more motivated, and you want to now take it a step further. And so that is when we go and we clean up the diet more, and we remove all the processed junky keto foods, and we focus on real whole foods that are not addictive, like meat, salmon, bacon, even cheeses, eggs, things like that. And that's really the only sure way for people to be able to stick to these diets. You cannot be eating foods that are so addictive, designed to get you hooked on them every single day, and expect for you to resist them 24/7 every single day. You have to eliminate them. I'm not saying never have a piece of cake ever in your life, or whatever it is that you like, but just in small amounts, and try to find versions of it that are not as addictive. So instead of regular ice cream, do the higher protein ice creams, you know, that aren't as delicious and like, you know, dopamine bursting in your brain as a regular one. Like, try to find ways, similarly to how when you have a cup of coffee, you know, after every high from the cup of coffee, there's a low. After every high from an addictive food, there's a low. So make sure your lows aren't very low, and you can control that by making sure your high isn't very high. And when you're eating foods that are not addictive, a tiny little change, if you want to have a little bit of fun, tastes incredible, you know? So
what you just described, I will say 100% in my experience working with people, that is exactly the right path you want to go down. I love that. Let's get sugar out. Let's give you the keto treats and bombs and whatever you want to get. That's totally fine. Let's get started on that. You're going to see really good results. Over time, we're probably going to need to cut those out for sure. But I agree with you 100%. If we can at least replace something with that's like a little bit palatable, and I don't know, I'm sure you'll agree with this. If we can eliminate hunger, if I can just show you for once in your goddamn life, like what it's like to not be so hungry all the time, and give you permission to fill up on foods like omelets or steaks, and really like get fully satiated, like what a blessing for people to not have to be on that roller coaster anymore, and to not be tied into food. So I love that approach, and I think that is the very best way to tackle that for sure.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, with experience, I'm sure we both come eventually to the same conclusion. Like, a lot of people can't just do cold turkey, you know, it's just you're setting them up for failure. Now for those who can, great, they already know themselves, and they probably don't need us.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. So, but the others, I include myself. I don't do very well with cold turkey, because I tried it, and it's hard for me to pull myself. My brain gets very, very much affected by addictive foods, and I have to be very careful with with those things.
Yeah, I kind of think the same thing on that note, like fasting. Like if you're fasting,
Yeah.
but you're eating the standard American diet, good luck. Like you're gonna white knuckle throttle that. You're gonna be absolutely miserable. But if you change the diet, now you can fast without really thinking about it. It's not a fast. You're just not hungry. And if you're not hungry, you're not eating, and you find you eat 1 or 2 meals a day, like you're doing fasting without even thinking about it. But trying it the other way is almost impossible. So yeah, that's a really good point.
Agreed, 100%, 100%. So Casey, share with us a little bit more about what you're working on right now, and what is next for you?
Oh, that's a really great question. So we started our company during the pandemic when the gym put us on unemployment. We kind of didn't know what we were going to do, if we were going to go back or not. Financially, again, with personal training being 100% commission, we needed a good base to go back. And we had all the people that we'd been training before. But a lot of them at the time weren't really going to go back. They were working from home, and they kind of enjoyed working from home. They didn't need to drive to the business park where the gym was located anymore. And they found like, well, I dusted off my health rider and a few weights and, the Thigh Master or whatever. And like, I prefer working out at home. And so when we started our company, it was really just to continue working with our people, but just in a different way, sessions outside or in people's homes, using minimal equipment, so lots of TRX and kettlebells and things like that. And so our company was born during the pandemic, really to continue working with the people that we had and anybody who wants to do personal training and nutrition coaching with us. But we're not in the mindset of like exponential growth. We're not trying to make this some kind of empire. We're really quite content helping people where we can, especially in our little neighborhood here just outside of South Jordan in Utah. And yeah, so it's been fun to kind of understand that like we're not on the grind as much, and now we have a lot more time. And so now we have the podcast. I started a second podcast, and we can put more content out there. And so I guess what's next for me was kind of understanding and learning, like now that we've done like 300 episodes of the podcast, that's a lot of content. And so I've been thinking, like, I wonder if I can create a course using the curated version of some of these conversations and taking like a 10 or 15 minute chunk of your episode that goes in depth onto some of these things and putting that out in a course that somebody could really learn this stuff in a way that they didn't have to listen to all 300 episodes of our show. And we could teach them about nutrition and exercise and proper strength training, how you really need to challenge muscle tissue. A lot of people think you need to be doing hopping around at high intervals and really weird, stressful exercise. And yeah, nah, you don't need any of that. No. You need to lift heavy. You need to lift heavy and stick with basics and all those things. So if we do something down the line, I would love to do some kind of content that we could present to people at a very low cost that could be really high benefit using the resources that we already have in these conversations. So that may be coming down the pipeline, but for now we're going to continue with the podcast. We're going to continue working with our people. Anybody can go onto our website. They can book a free 30-minute consultation. We can talk about anything. And do you want to talk about, a race that you're training for, or strength training, or, even things like stress and sleep? Like we can address all of those things. And so, yeah, we're really happy with the way things are going with the business, and we're really just kind of maintaining for now, which is great. And yeah, using the free time to help other people in ways that they can easily access is a big priority for us.
I love it. Thank you so much, Casey. I'm so glad that I got to learn more about everything that you're doing and that we got to connect. Where can people find you? And so that I make sure that I place all those links in the description box below.
Yeah, sure. And thank you so very much for the honor to be on your show. I don't do a ton of YouTube, but I've subscribed to your channel and I watch your interviews, and you do a great job interviewing. I love your guests, and the content you're putting out there is really helpful and inspiring. People can go to our website, which is myboundlessbody.com. That's really the hub where they can find everything. They can find us on social media. They'll find the podcast there. I used to do a lot more blogs, but I realized I like writing a lot more before I started doing podcasting. I like podcasting a lot more, and so I'm writing a lot less. But we might start up like a monthly newsletter or something. But either way, people can find us and access us there. And like I said, anybody can go on and sign up for a free 30-minute consultation. We can also do what is called a functional movement screening with people, which is a movement assessment. If we do it remotely over Zoom, we just have to be a little bit creative, but we can identify different movement patterns, even on Zoom, and be able to give you some ideas of how you can structure your workout so you can stay healthy and fit and not injured for the rest of your life. So those are all resources available, but the best place to go is our website, myboundlessbody.com.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Casey. Thank you for everyone for sticking with us till the end. I hope you enjoyed this kind of content. If you did, make sure you give this video a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit that little notification bell icon so YouTube alerts you every time I post a new video. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next one.